Okay, everybody, welcome to our Thursday night book club. We are so happy that you are here. I'm Susan Bailey, if you don't know me yet, and really excited to be able to lead this week's book club. I don't know about you all, but I am loving this book. Just so many practical takeaways and ways I can really see all of these things playing out, not only my business, but also just my daily life. So I think this is just one of those books that's just so good for life in general. And it's definitely calling me out on a lot of things in a very good way. I'm sure you can all probably relate to that. But tonight we are going to focus on chapters 11 and 12. I'm just going to give you a really quick summary of chapter 11. We'll kind of break that down together, and then we'll do the same thing for chapter 12. Okay, so chapter 11 was titled Walk Slowly but Never Backward. And I thought I'd just start off right on page 142, where it really talks about the first focus just being on the fact that it can be so easy to get bogged down just trying to find like the optimal plan or the best plan for change, and sometimes we get so focused on just figuring out the best approach that we never really get around to taking action. Like, who could relate to that one? So he also referred to the difference between just being in motion and taking action. And those things sound really similar when indeed they're actually very different from one another. Because when you're in motion, you're really just planning, you're strategizing, you're learning. And he talks how all those things are really good things, but they don't necessarily always produce results. Whereas, action is the type of behavior that's actually going to deliver an outcome. So they are very different. And honestly, the difference between those two things, it kind of made me giggle. And, maybe it does you too, because I could just think of plenty of times in my business where I was in plenty of motion, right? But just not necessarily taking action. So some of the things that came to mind were like, watching different strategy videos. That's a great thing. But if you're not actually like taking action from that and applying it, it's just more knowledge. It's just more head knowledge. Or lately just thinking a long time on my niche, like what do I want my branding niche to be? And I've just been thinking about that, but not actually just moving forward and taking action and putting it in place, even if it's just imperfect action, because in my opinion, imperfect action is better than no action, right? So I just think it's so important to remember that being in motion is useful, but we can't rely on that to produce an outcome all by itself, okay? Also, motion can be super deceiving, because it was kind of funny where we talked about, we have the tendency often to do this because it allows us to feel like we're making progress, and it feels that way. But really, we're just sometimes doing that as a way to avoid the risk of failure. So motion is just really preparing to get something done. It's not necessarily getting something done. Okay. He also talked about it's just as important to be mindful that sometimes your preparation can become a form of procrastination. So kind of along that same theme. And when we're catching on to that, it's a sign that we really do need to change something. And then page 143, he moved on to talking about, how long does it take to form new habits? And if we really want to master habits, the key is really just to start with repetition and not focusing on perfection. And that one was very convicting to me, because I'm a self-proclaimed perfectionist. And so, it's just important to remember to not let our desire for perfection just get in our way of actually making real progress, where we can actually sometimes fail, but we're failing forward. As far as the length of how far or how long it takes to form a new habit, he had just really, again, highlighted how important repetition is in the forming of habits. And it's just like building a muscle, he said. Habits really form on the frequency of our practice, not necessarily the length of time that we're doing something. It's how often we're doing something. So to really build a habit, you've got to practice it. And the most effective way for us to practice then is, of course, to make things easy. And that's kind of the theme of both of these chapters. So I'm going to pause there. because I'd like to give you guys a chance to chime in for chapter 11. And I would just love to hear what you thought, what resonated with you, what connections did you make, and have you applied any of these things, or do you recognize the need for application? So what do you think?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Mhm.
Okay. I thought that was really interesting. He talked about the photography students. I think that was in this chapter, yeah. And how the ones that, hold on, sweetie, I'll be out in a minute, okay? Sorry. How the ones that were in the pantry, sorry, the ones that were asked to produce more photos, the quantity group ended up with better photos than the ones that were asked to produce quality. And I kind of thought about that just with the business. Sometimes I feel like I overanalyze, like, what am I sending for a message? Not that that's not important, but sometimes I feel like it can freeze me from just sending the message. And yeah, over time you just get better at it because you've sent more messages, you've gotten different results from those messages, and then you can just apply that moving forward. But if you are so hyper focused on just the perfect message, you're never going to learn anything. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
I love that. That was an awesome example. And I love how you applied that too. Thank you so much for sharing.
I think the same holds true to our branding, right? I mean, we look at branding and you come into Plexus and you may look at someone who's been with Plexus for 4 or 5 years and you think, well, gosh, I can't do that. And you allow it to intimidate you and you think, I don't have it all together. I have to put up the perfect post, or it has to look a certain way, or the graphic has to be just so, or what if I get the wording wrong, or what? And in all honesty, it's just being your authentic, true self and sharing that with the world, and just being true to you and sharing your heart with people and doing that over time, right? Repeating that, you do learn to critique and kind of fine tune the skill of branding, whether it's your stories that you're afraid to do or actually putting a post up too. I mean, we've all been there. We all have those fears, and you get in that whole analysis paralysis and like, oh, it's just too scary, or I don't know what to put up there. And the more you do it, the less scary it becomes. And by default, you're starting to develop this talent in branding yourself that you never thought you would maybe be good or successful at. It just adds up over time. So I know it was that way for me anyway. And I look back at my posts from 5 years ago or pre-Plexus to now, and it's a lot different than it was back then.
That's so true, Shelley. I love that. It's a really cool way to just get to know yourself better too. Have you ladies noticed that? Like the more that you do that, the more you stay true to yourself and the more you share about the things that are important to you and add value, it's kind of a window inside our souls too, which I think is really neat. So think about, it's almost like a journal that we have to look back on, years down the road.
I thought that his point to just about the frequency issue, that I think it ties back to his earlier chapters, when every time, if you put your tennis shoes on and walk out the door and you say it's only going to be 2 minutes, and I'm probably blurring this with later chapters too, but that's a vote for who you said you wanted to be. So it's movement and action in the direction of your values. And I was thinking about this both, for me, kind of standing on the end of the diving board and how do I want to jump and all of that stuff. But I also was thinking about it spiritually and how much time I can waste going through the motions of Christianity instead of really connecting with God. And that made me really reflect about how I allocate my time, that it's not in the busyness of things, that it's in the intentional development of relationships. And then on the flip side of that, I was also just thinking about the people that I interact with and their tendency to do the same thing, which is flip around like we're moving, but not actually take action. And how we can coach, whether it's our clients and our customers, or I'm heading back to the school year and coaching my students. What does real studying look like? It doesn't mean just having your book open while you've got 6 tabs open on your computer. And I just think that's an area of confusion for a lot of people. And I thought he really, really explained it well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Thank you so much for that, Beth. Those are really excellent points. I love how you tied it into our faith journey, right? It's kind of like that translation from knowing things in our head to our heart, where it's it's an outward expression of that. So it's really good.
I wanted to share a story that I experienced firsthand today. I got my concealed carry back in February, and I did a full Saturday class, shot 100 rounds. I haven't touched it or practiced at all since. And I went to the gun range with ladies today. I picked that thing up and I was like, I don't even know what to do. This is exactly the example, is like, if you're not practicing it on a regular basis, you lose it. And I was scared, and I was really humbled, and I was frustrated with myself. And, I just like, there's a lot of things that I do habitually. And that was just a perfect example, I feel like, of what he kind of said in that 5th point in the chapter summary, that says the amount of time you have been performing a habit is not as important as the number of times you have performed it. So posting daily, it becomes easy after a while. Sending messages daily, it becomes easy after a while. It's scary at first, and you're like, how in the world am I going to do this? Keep doing it continually, and it becomes easy. I love that.
That is such a good illustration, Kay. Thank you so much. I love it. You're so right, though. I can remember back to the early days in my business where it's like, it was a point where I wasn't really all in yet, right? And so like, be on fire, and I'd be practicing and repeating, really consistently for a time. And then like, I would let life happen. And then so there would be a gap. And I just think about how much harder it was to like restart every time I'd have that gap in the practice. Whereas if you're just doing even like the small basic things every day, I think it's so key that we don't stop that action altogether. Like, even if for whatever, like life happens and you have to scale back from 10 reach outs to 3, at least you're still practicing, and it's going to keep it much more automatic. So I love how you tied that in. Any other thoughts at all from chapter 11?
Can you hear me all right?
Sure can.
Awesome. Okay. Page 142. It talks about, the difference between motion and action. And sometimes motion is useful, but it will never produce an outcome by itself. Well, obviously, we all want the outcome. Like, we all have goals. And in order to have that outcome, we have to do the actions. So why is it that we get stuck in the motion and we just don't take action, right? Well, that's because it says here that more often than not, we do it because the emotion allows us to feel like we're making progress without running the risk of failure. Our brains want us to avoid discomfort and seek pleasure and to always be right and to prove us right. So that's why we don't take motion, is because we want to delay that failure. So we need to switch our minds on that and, work on it and, take that action. Because, staying in the motions is not going to get us where we want to go.
Absolutely. So true. That ties so well to Janet into chapter 12. So I think that's a great segue into chapter 12, that whole like brain comfort topic. And that's really what chapter 12 is titled, The Law of Least Effort. And so this one also just made me laugh a little bit because, I think we all of our deep hope is that just our motivation would be the key to just changing our habits. Like, if we're just motivated enough, it will happen. But he had said that the truth is that our real motivation is to be lazy and just to do what's convenient. And that's really because that's how the brain is wired. Our brain is wired to conserve energy whenever possible. So it's just it's science basically that people are going to naturally choose the option that requires the least amount of work. And so I thought that was super interesting. Because every action requires a certain amount of energy. So the more energy that's required, the less likely that it is to occur. And then the less energy a habit requires, the more likely it is to occur. So I also thought it was interesting that he noted that every habit is just an obstacle to getting what you really want. Because what we really want is the outcome that a habit delivers, right? The challenge is that the more difficult the habit, then he said, there's also more friction between like where you are, but where you want to be, that desired end state. And so that's why it is so critical that we're making our habits easy so that we're actually going to do them even when we don't feel like it. And that really made me think about even the importance of having systems in place, having systems in place for our IPA or for our onboarding our people or whatever. It's making those habits easy so that if we are having that day where, sometimes we're just not feeling it, right? It makes it that much easier to still stay consistent and follow through. So, and that's what really brings us payoff in the long run. So I love some of the strategies he gave toward the end of the chapter for things like environment design, where basically you're just making doing the right thing as easy as possible. So like having your gym on the way home from work or things like that, or even priming your environment so that it's ready for use the next time that you need to use that environment. So I just even was thinking about like our office space, are we leaving it organized each day? Are we going over our IPA plans the night before so that the next day we can jump right into activity and we're not sitting there with a friction of like, oh shoot, who should I reach out to today? Or what am I supposed to do? Or, having those organizational things in place just makes it so much easier to follow through on the habits that we really want to have in place every day. And then I think that chapter was just summed up so well by the question he asked at the end, like, how can we design a world where it's easy to do what's right? Redesign your life so that the actions that matter most are also the actions that are easiest to do. I love that. So I'm going to cut myself off there because again, I want to hear from you guys. What are your thoughts on chapter 12?
I loved the paragraph on page 152. He says, you don't actually want the habit itself. What you really want is the outcome of the outcome the habit delivers. The greater the obstacle that is, the more difficult the habit, the more friction there is between you and your desired end state. And this is why it's so crucial to make your habits so easy that you'll do them even when you don't feel like it. And then just the next paragraph, it says, you are capable of doing very hard things. I used to think like back in college, I was so busy. And then I got married and it became a different form of so busy. And then I was a teacher and it was like, holy moly, that was in comparison easy. And then, every stage of life is there. And now we have kids, lots of kids and kids everywhere. And I love it. It's just chaotic. But I think to like all of you and what we're going through right now, like life doesn't slow down. And so I love to think about this like in our spiritual life and our personal life and our business life of going like, we're waiting for this perfect time for things to be easy. So like the habits can just so easily fit into my day and it'll be perfect and no, it doesn't slow down. Nothing slows down. Everything is always chaotic. It's a different chaotic, but it's like life isn't gonna just get easier. And so I love that it says that, like, make your habits so easy that you just do them even when you don't feel like it. And so that really stuck out to me.
That's so good, Kaylee. Thank you so much. You're so right on that. It's like I assumed like next week, I think my life's gonna be a little bit slower. Oh no, just if anything, it speeds up. So I totally get that.
A little side note on that. I love that so much, Kaylee. And for me, this has been the challenge of in that even in the hard, when you feel like it's doing a hard thing, finding joy in the moment that you're in, because there's always going to be something that isn't quite right in your world or in your life. And I would be a person that my tendency is to, well, when life looks just so, then it'll be good, right? And we'll experience the full joy or whatever. But the Lord's challenge to us is, what is the joy in today? And how are we just covering our life in that, instead of, waiting for everything to align? Because as you said, nothing ever really truly aligns. And when you think you got it all together, you think, next month I'll have this off my plate, or it's going to look this different. Well, there's going to be 5 more things that are going to show up the next month that are going to be considered obstacles in some mindsets. And you just say, okay, well, that's life. And we're going to experience joy, and we're going to do hard things regardless. So thanks for sharing that.
Mhm.
I think a lot of this is really good as far as like how we can help our customers too, when like if they're not being consistent or if they have an unhealthy habit. Just being able to share this with them, and that you can do this. How can we make this easier for you? Do you set your stuff on the counter? All those little things. It kind of, it just made me think of how much more we can help them and explain to them the importance of habits too.
Yeah, I was thinking of exactly the same thing, Andrew, in this chapter. That's a really good point. Like, really, everything we're taking this from this book can really help us just provide that much, I think, more meaningful customer service to our people when we can, I don't know, it gives us a little bit of peek inside of how our brains work. And so, yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that's awesome.
I was even thinking to go take it a step farther than that, and not just when people sign up and are actually using the products, but actually when talking to them about the whole product system and everything, is to talk to them with the least resistance, to show how, that it's easier and like more, like it says, like increase the friction associated with our bad ones, kind of like increase the friction they feel with what they're experiencing, and show the good habits, how that would be easier for them, so to speak.
Ooh, that is really good, Jana. Thank you. I love that. That's, so much connected. Yeah, showing people their pain points, and then choose your hard, right? We can choose the hard of like staying stuck where we've been, or we can choose the hard of taking on a new habit. But I think I'd much rather take that on. That was really good. Any other thoughts at all from chapter 12? Or if I missed you in chapter 11, you had something you want to backtrack on, that's totally fine too. So
I'm just really trying to work hard on, so I just launched my foster daughter. So I fostered her for 4 years. And so that took a lot, out of daily life. She has developmental disabilities. And so there were lots and lots of things to manage. And so now we're back to being sort of empty nesters. But my husband has a traumatic brain injury. And so I'm thinking about like my house and how that motion and movement and action, and how you can get yourself in a state of overwhelm. And he can get himself in a state of overwhelm even more easily than I can, because he doesn't have as much capacity and patience as he used to with himself. And so just trying to think of ways I can create systems now that I have a little bit of margin that will work. Like right now, I'm trying to do our taxes for last year. And I'm like, it's just so hard. So trying to create systems, but my problem in the past has been I've created systems that work for me and not systems that work for his brain.
Mm.
And so I feel like I need to be really conscientious about this. And of course, that translates to anybody we might be working with as well. Like educating myself on different people are going to respond to different kinds of systems. And the way he handles his paperwork and the way I would handle his paperwork might be different. But if we can get something that will make the overwhelm smaller for both of us, I'm just trying to think in terms of how I can apply this to getting, 200 farm receipts a year under control and in a way that he can access them, but I can access them as well because I'm the one that does the financials. And so I know I kind of rambled there, but right, our households need these systems. The people we live with need systems. So we always know where the toothpaste is, or we always know where the first aid kit in our house needs to be well known. We need systems like that too, but we also need to think about them working for the people we share our homes with, not just the way our brains work.
That is so good. Really, really good. I love the application. And, I was thinking too, like, and this is backtracking, I think, to one of the previous chapters, but even attaching a system or a habit or whatever to a desired activity, right? Something that you would maybe consider to be, a reward. So, once I organize 10 receipts today, then I get to follow it up by whatever it is, read your book or or take a bath or whatever it may be. So, but you're so right, because everyone's ideas for what would be a desirable outcome from things are different too, So, yeah, thank you for sharing. It's really good. And what a huge transition for you. Oh my goodness.
I was gonna say too, there may be some grief process that you're going through as well, saying goodbye to a foster child after 4 years. I can't even imagine.
Mhm.
And the loss that your husband has struggled with as well. So, um, it's hard to get out of the motion and into the action, I'm sure, but your awareness is a huge start. So, yeah, good job.
Yeah, it's on honestly, it's a lot. We've buried a mom, a dad, a mother-in-law, a father-in-law, a child in 10 years. And so, and a brain injury, and had 2 foster daughters. So, yeah, grief is something I'm unfortunately well acquainted with, and that has, it gives you less capacity because it just burns up all that energy in the back. But thank you I know that we sat next to each other and you foster as well. And I think Rochelle on here fosters as well. So a lot of us have a heart for the underdog. But to say it doesn't cost you something would be short-sighted.
It's not about us, is it?
It's worth it, but well, I think, what did I read? The hard things are often the holiest. I read that today and I thought that really stuck. It kind of related to the book today.
Mhm.
But the beautiful thing about the grit, obviously, is what I'm thinking with still choosing to start a business through all that hard. But it gives you purpose outside of that too. And sometimes we need to find that when we are in the hard, because we just talked about that. We all have hard. I mean, I could list off mine. Janelle can list off some. I know lots of us on here. We could list them off, right? But keep working. And that's what inspires people. People are still watching you through all of that. And just thoughts that came to my mind, I guess. And there's a lot of us on here that are doing that. And I'm sure there's a lot of you that I don't even know your whole stories. But keep it up, guys. We're doing it.
So true, Kay. Thank you. Well, I know we're getting close to, well, we just are about the end of our time. Is I just wanted to give a last chance for anyone who still had something in their heart or mind that they wanted to share this evening. Is there anyone else? All right. Well, it looks like we're going to be able to wrap things up right on the nose tonight. Thank you so much, everyone, for just being here and for sharing your thoughts and insights. It was a great discussion. Looking forward next week, I think then we do chapters 13 and 14, I believe. So we will see you all next Thursday. Okay. Have a great evening.